Would you pick up and move your family for an entry-level IT job, moving from California to North Carolina? Wow, this is a crazy story with a special guest, Chris Tucker. You are listening to the IT Path podcast. I'm your host, Dana Morrison. Let's go and help you claim your journey into IT. Okay, in today's IT Path podcast, we are joined by a special guest, Chris Tucker, my good friend and coworker. Chris moved from California to North Carolina for his first job in IT. I mean, he moved his family. He took big risks, and now he's doing something he loves. So let's dive into it. Okay, Chris Tucker, welcome.
How are you doing? How's it going, Dan Morrison? How are we doing, sir?
I'm doing great. So let's jump right in. Let's go all the way back to your roots, history, childhood. Tell us, give us the world of Chris Tucker.
Sure. For starters, I love the introduction. It makes me sound a lot crazier than I thought it did. But now hearing you say it, I was like, oh, that is a little crazy. I'm Chris Tucker from Los Angeles, California. I grew up in a small town outside of LA. LA, as you have to understand, it isn't really just Los Angeles. It's a bunch of communities and towns that are around it. So even if you're not from Los Angeles, you're still from Los Angeles. But I grew up in a small little city called Culver City, and had our first old Apple computer there that I broke, as you would imagine, and then had to repair so that my mother wouldn't kill me, which kind of began the journey to in IT.
How old were you then?
I couldn't have been older than probably 10,
Cool.
about 10 years old.
Yeah.
And then, when I was about 12 or so, we moved to the Valley. It's about 30 miles north of LA. And we got our first compact Presario. And I subsequently broke that, as you would imagine, and then had to figure out how to fix that as well, again, so that my mother wouldn't kill me. And just kind of been into the hardware of IT ever since.
Now the Presario, is that like the bubblish looking case?
Yeah. Oh, I still want to buy one. Nice, big purple front facing, very circular design. Not a great computer, but for me, it was the introduction to the actual hardware of machines and how all the pieces work and how they all interconnect with each other. Yeah.
I remember that one well. I actually worked on quite a few of those in my early days.
Yeah, I believe it. I believe it.
Yeah, that's cool. All right. So then where?
From the Valley, we moved down to Inglewood, California. So again, now we're back south of Los Angeles, and that's where I got more into. In my time in the Valley is when my friends and I started building gaming PCs. We're talking, this is like 2000, 2002, 2003, 2004. And, Counter-Strike, it was big at the time. If anybody remembers playing that game, Counter-Strike and, what was it? Warcraft 3, massive game in my life. Warcraft 2, right at the edge, the precipice of the massive multiplayer online games, the MMOs. So by then, I built a gaming PC and have learned how all the mechanics work together and can kind of do my own thing. And so then from there, we moved to Inglewood, which at the time I lived there wasn't the safest community. So I spent a lot of time indoors playing on a gaming PC, and which further got me deeper into the hardware side of repair work. And that's when I started playing around with virtual machines and installing, Ubuntu side by side with a Windows and Windows installation. And that's when I started dabbling into going to school for various IT projects and IT education.
Oh, that's cool. So now I know your story, but none of our listeners know your story. What were you doing for work?
Oh man, everything. I worked at a bill collecting agency. I worked at Baskin Robbins. I worked at I worked at a what's called a first call service, which is they're the people who pick up uh, 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 decedents after they pass away. I worked there for a while. Worked at Lowe's. I did Whole Foods for about 10 years. Worked in grocery. Um,
I didn't
all
know
the
the
while,
other ones. I knew about the Lowe's and Whole Foods, but I didn't
oh
know
yeah.
about the other ones. Man.
Oh,
Yeah.
I got stories that I can tell you about first call places.
Oh, I
Yeah,
bet.
it was I've been kind of all around, and I there's a lot of things that I didn't know. There's a lot of things that I didn't know the computer side of knowledge that I had, that I kind of built and cultivated myself through the years. I didn't really know that that was worth anything, because to me, I've been doing it since I was a teenager. So for me, I assumed everyone knew how to do it, and everyone that I hung out with knew how to do it, because all my friends were into computers. And so when I learned about virtual machines and installing from an ISO file, all my friends learned how to do that. So everyone that I grew up with had this base of technological understanding that I've spent genuinely most of my life to date assuming everyone else knew. And then it was only as I got older, and only as I started working more, and and went back to school, really, that I started realizing, hey, this is of value to some people, and there's something that I could do with this.
That okay. So, I mean, let's think about that.
Yeah.
So, you were building some base knowledge that you didn't even realize had value to it.
Mm-hmm.
So that came from building your own computers, taking things apart, putting them together, and you're messing around with virtual machines. You were building ISO, bootable ISOs.
Mm-hmm.
You were installing Ubuntu operating system,
Yeah.
and you were even running that in a VM on the computer.
I was mostly using it as a side by side installation
Right.
with
Okay.
Windows.
So you would hold down the key or whatever when it booted, or you would select it.
Well, I set it so that it would default to the boot screen, the boot menu, so you
Yep.
could choose whether you went to Windows or Linux. And I would always go to Linux because it was newer. It was different to me. And
Grub, was
once
that
you get
Grub?
comfortable,
Grub,
I think so.
Grub
Yeah,
loader. Yeah,
yeah.
that's cool. Yeah, and so I mean, what? How does Chris Tucker go from running basically Windows to even hearing about Linux?
A buddy of mine, his name's David Stevens, and his father is probably the single most important people I've met in my life from a technological standpoint. His dad essentially does what we do. His dad worked in a small business, and was on the IT team. I think he was like the number three on an IT team or something like that. And so he would come home and teach David the things that he learned, and then David would show us the things that his dad taught him. And so his dad was the one who was like, "Oh yeah, there's another operating system out there that's not, Mac OS, and it's not Windows, and you can play around with it and see what you can do. And there's a lot of free software, which, as broke teenagers, that really appealed to us. The idea that we didn't have to pirate software; people were
Yeah.
just making software and putting it out. But also just the idea that people were creating freeware, creating software, and wanting other people to try it, wanting other people to test it, releasing open source code, and wanting other people to edit it and customize it and work on it. It just, for me, it opened up this whole world of, it's not all commercialism and it's not all capitalism. Some people were just really, really interested in these little boxes that I'm interested in. And they're interested in it enough to create something that they could probably sell, but they would still give it away because they want to see what you can do with it.
Yeah, yeah. And for like computer people, a lot of times you refer to your machine as your box.
Oh yeah.
And if this idea is new to you, when we talk about boxes, we're talking about computers.
Yeah, sorry.
No, that's good. And to clarify something, so what we do, and I'll let you finish your story, but we're both working for a company, Stitch Golf. It's a luxury brand, apparel, golf gear, And I have to clarify with this statement that anything that I share, or we share on here, is not the views or expressions of Stitch Golf. I have to just say that. But yeah, so continue on in your story.
Yeah. Gosh, where was I?
So you realize now that this knowledge that you have, there's some value to it. You're connecting value now to it, and you're just starting your education path, your formal education path, I should say, right? Because your experience is education too. A lot of times we undermine that experience. For some reason, we think that that's less valuable than sitting in a class. Really, the opposite is true. It's more valuable to gain experience working on something than it is to sit in the classroom. But for some reason, we've got our heads really kind of screwed up in that respect. But so carry on. You started some education. What was that like?
I went to Santa Monica College in Los Angeles, and yeah, that didn't go very well originally. And what I hadn't quite figured out yet was that I needed, I had some, it was by no fault of the college. I had internal personal growth that was needed because up to this point, the majority of my computer experiences was more off the grid, a little more, not necessarily, we can't call it black hat anymore, but not necessarily a black hat, but just not very formalized education. It was more, how can you dig? How can you find? How can you explore the creativity of technology? And sitting in a classroom with a professor lecturing to me about things that I literally learned when I was 13 years old was just, it was tough, and I wasn't able to corral myself to the educational path. And so I went and would pass. I would go to community college and I'd pass all my computer classes easily, and then I would fail everything else. I would fail film and astronomy and all the other classes that they make you take when you go to college, so that you can keep the college open, because nobody needs most of those classes if you're not majoring in that. All of those general educations, it just never worked out. So I ended up bombing out of school, and then I would try to go again. I bomb out of school, and I try to go again, and I bomb out of school. And by that point, I kind of just given up on the whole idea. And in the back of my mind, my whole life, in the back of my mind, I always had it that at some point I would kind of get it together and would finish school proper and start working in IT, because you just had this, or for me anyway, I had this thing that told me this is what I would eventually end up doing. And it, I bounded around for a while, worked as I listed Lowe's and all these jobs, worked all these jobs. There's nothing wrong with it. I would say they've given me the foundation, the customer service foundation that I have, where I'm always trying to help people, and I'm trying to figure out how best to assist all the people that even we work with. Chiefly comes from working all these retail jobs, these customer service jobs. But around 2017, my wife got pregnant. And as I think,
so wait, what year were you in college? Were you at was Santa Monica Community College?
Santa Monica Community College. Yeah, that's like 2010, 2011, 2012, in that range. And then by 20, and then I start working at Whole Foods, and that's where I met my wife, my now wife. And I was content. I've told you this several times. I was content working Whole Foods the rest of my life. Like that was it. That's what it paid the bills, and I was ill motivated and towards anything greater. As long as the bills were paid and I got to hang out with my wife, like I was happy. That's all I've ever really aspired in my life.
Man.
Comfort, yeah, it's dangerous. Comfort is the most dangerous thing.
Comfort is. Oh, I totally hear you. So a little bit about my own story. I'm sure I've told you this. I was at Liberty University. I was actually studying theology, and I wanted to take computer science as a minor. I've always loved technology. From the time my parents gave me a Commodore 64, even before that, I loved taking apart things. I loved putting them back together, electronics, all that sort of stuff. In my room, I had my ceiling was covered in wire that actually was a homemade antenna that went to a little shortwave radio that my parents gave me, and I would pick up stuff from like all over the place. It was great. But I got a D in my Pascal programming class, and Pascal was pretty old at the time, old computer language. And I got a D in my pre-calculus class. Well, guess what? Getting D's in your minor, that's not good.
Yeah.
They're kind of like, okay, let's find something else for you,
Yeah.
So I had to drop my minor, and now I'm working in tech. It's crazy to think about that, like how this system is not really designed to pull out of you what you feel like, how you feel like you're wired, created to work. You know what I mean?
Yeah. You and I have spoken about this a few times. We discuss the structure of the college system in the United States, and probably the structure of the school system at large. So even going down to high school and middle school, it's designed to get the most amount of people through the most amount of courses. And it's not, they just simply don't, there's too many people. They just don't have time to dig into an individual. You and I both work in tech, and we both struggled educationally in tech. And we do I would say, not to pat ourselves on the back, we do a pretty good job here. We have a decent setup here.
Dang, good job.
But we both struggled. We both had failures, consistent failures. And there are people who don't quite understand, perhaps individuals, but certainly who don't understand tech and that the pathway and how it works and how it affects the mind, who, when things kind of go left or aren't going to the way that you originally planned, their plan is, hey, you need to get out of this. When really it's, well, let's figure out, if this is the thing you're passionate about, how do we figure out how to get you from point A to point B? And how do we get you on a path that's going to lead to you being successful? At least that's how I've experienced it so far.
Yeah, I agree. So it's 2017 now. It's 2017.
Yeah.
You were about to say what was going on there.
Yeah, it's 2017. I'm at about 9 years at Whole Foods at this point. It certainly looks like I'm going to be, and I was a cashier. It certainly looks like I'm going to be a cashier at Whole Foods for the rest of my life. Not that there's anything wrong with being a cashier at Whole Foods. It's a decent job. As my grandfather says, you're not hitting nobody over the head and stealing from anybody. Like it's an honest day's work. But I was unhappy. I hated working. I was miserable at the concept of waking up to go to work every day. And I had to do it because I was with my wife, and she had children, so I had a family to provide for, and so I kept going to work. And then one day, and then we find out that she's pregnant, and my son Damien, I've learned that he's coming, and I still kept working at Whole Foods, still ill motivated, and worked at Whole Foods through her whole pregnancy. Didn't make a whole lot of plans to change anything through her whole pregnancy. And then in September 2018, my big chubby little man is born, and I get 6 weeks off in California for paternity leave. And so during those 6 weeks, I'm home with my wife, I'm with my baby every day. And even still, Whole Foods is fine. Like I'm going to work my 6 weeks and I'm going to go back to Whole Foods. And I was actually just telling, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say you were off 6 weeks, right?
I was off for 6 weeks. Yeah. At home. I was just telling Jim this in the break room this morning. I was working. I had 6 weeks off, and I'm with my wife and my son and the older kids, and everything is fine. And I go back to Whole Foods 6 weeks in one day. I go back to work my Whole Foods shift, and it's a closing shift, which they purposely scheduled me for because they wanted to make my transition a little easier, so I didn't have to wake up first thing and come in. And I'm closing, doing all the closing detail, and I just look around, and the first thought that comes to my head is, I'm not putting my son to bed tonight so I can bag groceries for these people. Like, no, this isn't going to happen. And that's the spark of motivation. That's when I have to start figuring out a game plan on how to change the direction of my life and my son's life and my wife's life, and how we can start leveling up, because where we're at is not acceptable. Not being able to put your kid to bed at night is not acceptable. Having to miss his soccer games when he's older is not acceptable. And I couldn't get mad at Whole Foods. I couldn't get mad at my boss who scheduled me. I couldn't get mad at any of those. The only person who was at fault was me, because 5 years ago, I should have been laying the groundwork so that by the time my son was born, I could be home with him at night. 5 years ago, I should have been laying the groundwork so that when he has a soccer game on the weekend, I could be there. But I wasn't doing that. So I didn't get mad at anybody. I didn't get mad at anyone but myself. I internalized all of it. And I started spending time and trying to figure out another route. And then I was in the shower one day while he was taking a nap, and I was listening to I think YouTube music.
I thought you were going to say David Goggins.
No, I wasn't listening to Goggins yet. I hadn't found my boy David Goggins yet. But I was listening to music.
Chris is a huge fan of David Goggins, by the way.
Love him.
Chris, you would love to meet David Goggins, wouldn't you?
I would, but I would, to be honest.
I mean, why not? Why not?
Because he would say things about me I don't want to hear.
Hey, that's okay.
Yeah, I'm a fan.
Yeah.
I was in the shower and a commercial came on in the middle of streaming, and it was for community college. And the message essentially, it wasn't Santa Monica. I think, to be honest, I think it was like Everest College, like one of those. Okay. But the message is what's important. Oftentimes you have to ignore who is delivering the message to you and try to just take value out of the core message. And if you can synthesize value from the core message, then who says it is irrelevant. Like I couldn't tell you which college they were advertising, but the message that they were giving essentially was, if your current station in life is not good enough and you're willing to do the work, here's an avenue for you. And it wasn't even for IT. It was just college, because they tell these kids now, hey, go to college, you'll be fine. Doesn't matter if you get a degree in something that you can make money in, just go to college, you'll be all right. But I've always had that inkling in the back of my head that one day I'd get it together and would work in IT. And I heard that, and it, while my son was asleep, I heard that and it tipped me off. And I knew, like, this is the path, this is the way. And Erica came home that night, or she was working, which is why I was home with the baby. Erica's my wife. She came home from work, and I told her, I said, hey, I got to talk to you. This is what I want to do. Like, I'm going to go back and I'm going to do it. And she, even though she she knew well of my history in college and knew that I had many, many instances of failure and quitting and walking away and stuff like that. She knew when it came to my son, there was no limit to what I was willing to do for him. And so she backed me fully. And 2.5 years later, I was done. And I have my AS in computer networking and security. And now I work with my good man, Dana Morrison. And life is much better. We have fun. Yeah, we have a good time.
We have fun. So question,
Mm-hmm.
to this point, what mental wall or mental walls do you feel like you had to get through in order to get this opened up? I'm obviously something from that message, from that commercial, resonated with you. But a lot of times we're afraid to make decisions because there's some perception problem that we're having, right?
Yeah.
What was that?
Well, you can't, I mean, to your perception issue, like, you can't make decisions out of fear. And so one of the things that I learned from my older brother, who's a Marine, was, even when you're afraid, if it's the thing you're doing and it's the thing you're doing and it's the thing you have to do, you just do it, and you do it to the best of your ability, because that's going to give you the best chance of success. If you spend your time overly concerned about how exactly it's going to go and waiting until it's exactly right, like, you're never even going to get started. And if you never get started, you're never going to finish. So you just have to start.
Yes, I'm writing that down. Can't wait until it's exactly right.
It's never going to be right. A pretty good plan is better than a perfect plan every day of the week. If you're going to wait another week to plan it just right, you're going to be sitting there forever, and you're never going to get started.
Done is better than perfect.
You
can get something done. Something. Okay.
It's always an improvement.
Yeah. So mental wall, just the fear factor in there.
Fear factor.
Looking for precise, like, moment in time that all of a sudden everything's going to converge, and life doesn't happen that way. Okay. So talk to me about financial walls. Was that a real struggle? I mean,
so I'll paint this picture as best I can. When I met my wife, she had 2 children. So there were a total, by this point, there's a total of 5 of us, with me going back to school. There's me, my wife, my 2 elder children, and now my son. So there's a total of 5 of us, and we live in Southern California. And myself and my wife work at Whole Foods. It's an expensive life, and without a lot of resources coming in, it became clear pretty quickly that there wasn't really an option for like daycare with the baby. The older kids were in school, but for the baby, one of us always had him. So right around late 2019, early 2020, when COVID hit, I quit my job at Whole Foods and studied and was in school full time and studied full time. Took more classes than full load, and I was home with the baby all day. I would wake up with him whenever he woke up in the morning. Sometimes 5 a.m., 4:30. So it's whenever the baby got up, and then I was with him until my wife got home from work. And she worked an early shift, so she would get home say she'd get home say 2 o'clock. Then from 2 o'clock, I would go to the library or the coffee shop and study and do homework until about 6:30. Then I would drive home. We would have dinner as a family. We had a little dog park right outside, and we would play for a little bit, and then we kind of do the wind down, and then I would go back to studying. So we survived in Los Angeles on one woman's full-time grocery store salary for a family of 5 for about 2 years.
Okay. People need to hear that. I think people need to hear that last part again.
Yeah.
Say that last sentence one more time, Chris.
We survived as a family of 5 on one full-time grocery store worker's salary in Los Angeles for about a year and a half.
That is crazy.
Yeah.
That is I mean, there's a lot of financial entanglements that go on there, because it's not a cheap place to live.
No, not by any stretch. And with our older kids at the time were teenagers. They had proms and school dances, and they had friends they wanted to try to keep up with. They're normal teenagers. They had all the drawbacks, and we had to make it work as a group, because the only way we were going to overcome our situation, and our situation was we were tight when I was working. When it was me and Erica working full time, we were tight. It was tight when it was just her, and the amount of pressure that was on her shoulders, because you can't. It's not like you're going in and you're cursing your boss out or anything, but like you can't do anything out of line because it's all on you. But it's with the understanding, like, hey, we're shooting for something further. We're trying something bigger and better. And she's a strong woman, so we were able to, as a team, as a partnership, we were able to get through it.
That's crazy. So you're getting through. We're going to take a break in just a second, but you're getting through that. Just the schooling, the tight finances, all of that. You have this determination, this grit that's obviously with you. And then we're going to come back. I want you to hear Chris's story about, like, just from finding a posting that maybe, from California to North Carolina. This is crazy story, man. So let's take a break for just a second. When we come back, you're going to hear the rest of Chris's story. Hey, this is Dana Morrison, host of the IT Path podcast, and I hope you are enjoying this week's episode. Are you interested in getting into IT? Let me ask you one simple question. What is holding you back? IT Path is dedicated to developing a community, content, and courses that will help you get unlocked and stay unlocked on your IT journey. I have more than 25 years experience in IT, and I want to share with you what I've learned and give you the tools to succeed on your very own IT path. Even if you are just starting out on your IT journey, we're here for you. To find out more, simply go to itpath.net and sign up for the mailing list, and we will start by sharing some tips, tricks, and tools to help you get going and keep you going. Go to itpath.net and claim your journey. Start your IT path today. Thank you so much, and let's get back to the episode. Okay, we're back. Chris, so tell us about, like, some of the things, like the straw that breaks the camel's back. We're going to get into the rest of the story here, but talk to us about that. Like, what were the things that just, like, this happened and this was like an eye-opening moment for me. This was an epiphany moment. I'm like, I gotta make a big change.
Something has to change. Yeah. And so, as I said, it was right around, when I say right around COVID, that is a little loose. It was, late January 2020. Um, so we just finished Christmas 2019, and we had, gotten our kids gifts and done all that. And, we pinched and saved and scrimped and cut corners here and there so that we could still deliver Christmas for our kids. And, it would have been late January. 3 weeks after Christmas, I went from working 36 to 39 hours a week at Whole Foods to 4 hours a week overnight. They didn't tell anyone. They didn't give us any warning. They didn't allow us to. And this isn't a trash all over Whole Foods thing. I'm sure my bosses got a mandate from somebody above them, and they did their job. But yeah, overnight they essentially cut my salary, or they cut my hours to 4 hours a week from let's say 38 hours a week without a word, and didn't tell us when it would be ending, didn't tell us when we would all go back to our regular schedules, didn't really give us any information about it. And we were just kind of told to hang on, and we're all getting through this together. We're all, and when you see the person who's telling you that is working 40 hours a week and is paying their bills and taking care of their family, but the rest of us are on literally 4 hours a week.
4 hours a week.
4 hours a week. And so obviously my paycheck dropped a lot. I'm also dealing with the stress now. I've been at school for about 6 months, and I'm moving on to the next semesters, and I'm trying to plot out this plan. And personally, I'll be honest with you, I took it as, once I went back to school and I stopped seeming like a lifer there, because there are people who are lifers at Whole Foods. They'll be there as long as they're working. I won't say the rest of their life, but as long as they're working. I think once they figured out I wasn't going to be a lifer, they were like, oh, well, we can cut that guy. He's right for it.
Oh gosh.
Even though, and this is, I'm 31, 32 in this story. So I'm not one of the kids who work there who are living with their parents. I talked to all my bosses regularly, because we were all adults, we were all grown-ups. They all understood. They knew my family. They knew that I just finished buying Christmas presents for my kids. So it's not like we had a bevy of savings. And you're working grocery, you're working retail, you're not really doing savings anyway. You're just living paycheck to paycheck, hand over fist, as my mom says. So they knew
a year and a half year old, couple other kids. Year and a half year old, couple other kids. Now cut from 36 to 4 hours a week. Yeah, that definitely sounds like something that breaks the camel's back. So in that point forward, it was basically your wife's income for like a year and a half. Is that right?
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we rely on, and it's what I would advise any person that's working a job they don't love and is interested in going back to school to complete their education. For starters, we'll probably conclude on this, but for starters, find out roughly what the pay of the job you're looking for is gonna make. So make sure that all the sacrifice is actually worth it. But look into Pell Grants. Look into federal aid that you don't have to pay back. You don't have to go down the road of a student loan. Student loans have to be paid back. All the talk about paying off student loans, that's not for you. That's for people who took out student loans way before you, who've been paying on those loans or maintaining those loans for 10, 15, 20 years. But as far as the grants are concerned, apply for every single grant you can find, all of them. Write every essay they ask you to write. Make sure everything is turned in on time. You got to get.
Somebody's coming in the office.
Somebody's looking for you. Yeah, I'm in Dana's office right now.
Yeah.
We did it through the grant, essentially the grants system, and that's how we kind of made it through. I stretched every grant I ever got. I would receive a couple $1,000s. I received like $2,000, maybe sometimes twice a semester, but usually just once. And so I would have to stretch that $2,000 for about 3.5 months.
So from now California to here, you graduated from your program, and I mean this is quite a shift. Talk to us about the shift and what happened that brought you to North Carolina. I mean, this is crazy.
Yeah, essentially, the major issue I had, and you'll probably be able to speak to this, as long as I have worked on computers in my life, I had never actually worked a job where my primary job description in detail was IT. So even though for the most part I could do the job, it's hard to explain to someone, hey, I'm not going to blow up your server room if you trust me with access to your server room. So I in LA, I started looking for IT jobs as best I could, but there's such an overwhelming number of people in the city. The likelihood that someone is going to apply for the same job that you're applying for is pretty high, and that person likely has more experience than you do, even if I had just freshly graduated. Um, and so housing prices were getting kind of crazy, and my wife was interested in moving, and she had started looking into North Carolina, Raleigh in particular, and so she encouraged me strongly, who I had to listen to because I hadn't worked in a year and a half.
Got a good woman there, Chris Tucker.
Hey, you got to know when to listen. There's nothing wrong with being a man and wanting to make the decisions, but you got to know when to
This
listen.
is huge too. Your wife is supporting you. She's behind you. She has confidence that what you're doing is meaningful and valuable. And then you graduate and she's still standing behind you saying, all right, Chris, take a look at this.
Take a look at this. And she's right. She spoiler, she's 1,000% right. Which I'm sure she's going to rewind that and listen to it a few times. But she's 1,000% right. She advised that I should start looking at Raleigh because the tech industry in Raleigh, in particular, at the time was booming, and there was jobs were opening up and companies were moving here. And so she said, hey, why don't you start looking in the Raleigh area? I have obviously never been to North Carolina before. I'm a Los Angeles guy. I spent most of my life on the West Coast, but I was kind of tired of LA, and LA had a really really rough time through COVID. If you don't know about that, you can look into it on your own. But LA had some rough months and years, partially attributed to COVID. So I started looking in Raleigh, and I applied one day at all these companies in Raleigh, and then the next day I applied at Stitch, and I saw a posting. I think it was on Indeed. It was either Indeed or Monster. I've never been able to get an answer from Missy about that. But I saw the posting and I gave it a shot, and I got an email back, and that, I mean, I'll tell you, Dana Morrison, I tell you the truth, I'll remember that email the rest of my life. It was a genuine, jubilant celebration in my house when Missy contacted me and was like, "Hey, let's have a conversation." And then we talked, and I, charmed her. I did what I do, Dana. I gave her that good Tucker charm, and she said that she thought it was great, and we should move on to the next step. And then that's when I got to start talking to you.
Yeah, and I mean, from my perspective, I went back. I remember I went back to Missy. I'm like, "Are you serious? Is this guy really seriously going to move out here from California? I mean, come on." She's like, "They say they're serious."
Yeah.
I'm like, "All right, set up the interview."
Yeah.
Like,
Well, I told her we're coming no matter what. So we had already, by this point, by the time I contacted HR here, we had already decided that we were moving to Raleigh, kind of no matter what happened. And so even in my second interview, when I was one-on-one with you, I told you, we were talking about running and getting up to 10 miles running. And I said, well, even if it doesn't work out and if you go in a different direction, we'll go running after I get there. Like, because I'm coming no matter what. And luckily that worked out, and we get to hang out a little bit.
yeah. That's and now you're renting a house near a trail near the news. Mm-hmm. That's awesome. So you packed up your nice newish minivan and got on the road. You weren't driving a minivan.
No, I was driving.
What did you drive across the country? I'm telling you guys, this is a crazy, awesome story, man.
I drove you can look it up. I drove a 2013, my wife's 2013 Honda Accent, which is not a large car. It doesn't fit much, but it's what we had. And the reason I drove that car was my car, which was my grandfather's 2000 Buick Century, was parked in the driveway where we lived, inoperable. And so I took my wife's car. We got my grandfather's car repaired. No, she was borrowing a friend's car when I drove cross country. I think she was borrowing a friend's car, and I drove her car cross country, and it took me when I get here 3 days. I got here on April 18th. I started working on the 19th. I had never been to Raleigh. I didn't know anyone in Raleigh. We signed up for our apartment based on my offer sheet from Stitch after Stitch hired me. That was a massive party in my house, by the way, since Dad hadn't worked in a year and a half.
That's awesome.
Yeah, we got our apartment based on the offer sheet from Stitch, and I drove to an apartment I had literally never seen, on a street I had never seen, at a city I've never been to start work literally the next day. Which again, in hindsight, sounds insane.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, man. This is an insane story. So I want to tell you something from my perspective, and I hope that this is an encouragement to those that are listening. There's a lot of people that are wired like me that are willing to, you got somebody who's a go-getter, who is exhibiting the potential to put in all that hard work, whether or not they have a lot of experience. To me, that doesn't matter, because I'm going to bring them into a role where they don't know anything about the environment, and I'm taking a risk on them, they're taking a risk on us. But I'm cool with teaching people how to do stuff. I am cool with figuring out, like, let's figure out how to automate. We've got so much stuff automated here, it's crazy. But we got tickets that automatically populate on the board for when to check the backups and when to check this and that. So we know that the infrastructure is running solid. But the on the job training, I'm more like, let's get the right person, and then let's give them the skills, because you can find people with the right skills that are not the right fit for the company. And I would say you were one of our company's best decisions, in my opinion, Chris Tucker.
I appreciate that. I really do.
But yeah,
I agree.
Yeah. So we're going to close up. We've been chatting all about Chris Tucker, the Tuckers moved from California to North Carolina, the journey of trying to figure out where to be on that tech path, the journey of exploring what you were created internally, like this curiosity with technology, and fostering that, and how that generated meaningful skills that are valuable in the market, even though at the time you didn't recognize it. Talked about this whole process of trying to figure out, how do you get into the community college, and how do you help pay for that, and looking for the different grants that are available, and everything to get you on your path. A lot of risks, a lot of things going on inside the world of the Tuckers, no question. Is there anything that you would want to make sure gets emphasized to anybody out there who's thinking about tech and thinking about maybe taking a first step, but they're just kind of in this state of like, I just don't know?
Yeah. One thing leaps to mind, and it's something that I learned while I was running when I was in school. Because I took up running while I was going through schooling, and at my toughest time, when I'm averaging sleep. I was averaging about 4.5 hours of sleep for probably about a year and a half, just through studying and up with the baby and stuff like that. The main message I would say that you kind of have to get down, and it's not just for going back to school. It's probably applicable for every aspect of your life. You're not the person who failed 2 years ago. You're not that guy, or you're not that girl anymore. That person is gone. You are who you are today. You're not even who you were last week, because all of the experiences that you had in the last week have shaped who you are today. But the person who you were 5 years ago didn't have any of those experiences. So a big part of it is, like, you have to forgive yourself for every mistake you made in the past. You just need to move on. You have to move on from those things and just start cultivating who you want to be 5 years from now. One of the major motivators for me in school and all of that was, people kept telling me how fast the child years of my son will go by. They kept telling me, like, oh, well, the first 2 years, they go by just like that. The first 3 years, they go by just like that. And so I would sit and think, well, if they're going to go by really quickly anyway. Where do I want to be at the end of that? Do I want to be in the same place, but with him older? No, I want to be in a house. I want to drive a car that's stable and safe. I want my wife to be relaxed and not have the pressure of carrying the chief financial burden of our family. Okay, those are the things you want. Now, how do you go about achieving them? And every time I would, receive a test that I didn't do as well as I wanted to, or, a group project that didn't go the way that I planned, I just had to think, hey, okay, that happened. What are we going to do? What have we learned that we can implement for next time? Because it's everything is about next time. Yeah, everything is about next time.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean ignore what you're doing. That doesn't mean ignore your past, but analyze your past enough to learn from it. And we do this at work. Analyze your past enough to learn from it. And then you got to discard that and move on, because all it's ever going to do is drag you down. All it's ever going to do is slow you up. And if you hear my situation and how we were kind of back against the wall for a while, living on one income, you don't have time to think about what you should have done when you were 18. You don't have time to think about, I think, I would hear, if you could go back to when you were 25, what would you tell yourself? You are wasting time. You're wasting time thinking about what you would do when you were 25, because you'll never be 25 again. You will be 40. You will be 50. So what do you want to do? And where do you want to be when you're 50 years old? And what can you do today to ensure that you are where you want to be when you're 50 years old? That is a good use of time. Looking backwards, unless you're analyzing it so that you can progress forward, looking backwards is in general a waste of your time. So just start. Don't read podcasts. Don't listen to podcasts, except for this one. Don't read books. Don't read.
It's got to be profitable. It's got to be moving you forward. That's what you have to listen to. If it's not moving you forward, then it's a waste. You got to cut it loose. Got to cut it loose. That's awesome.
I agree, man. 100%.
All right, man. Chris, it's been awesome talking with you. I'm glad we finally got to record this. I think this is attempt number 3. And
it's been a crazy week.
Yeah, we've got to go. But hey, push through whatever it is that's holding you back. Figure out what the mental walls are, and you got to just push through it. You got to dream a little bit. You got to make goals. You got to push yourself forward. Maybe listen to a little Goggins every once in a while. That'll get you going, right?
Amen.
All right. Okay. Thank you, Chris Tucker. You have a good one.
Thank you, Dana Morrison. Be well.
You have been listening to the IT Path podcast. Did you like this episode? Why not subscribe and share with others? IT Path is dedicated to helping you claim your IT journey. You can find out more at itpath.net.